Hello, welcome to Uranian Streams. My name is Molly. I'm here with Mario, and today in our aspect series, we are discussing the energetics of having the planet Venus conjunct Pluto in one's natal birth chart. So how that might express, and we are going to first intro the two planets, discuss how this aspect operates, perhaps provide some examples of notables with this aspect in their chart, and then at the end, kind of wrap up with how to empower this aspect if you happen to have Venus conjunct Pluto in your birth chart. Sound good, Mario?
Yeah, that sounds good.
So I'll let you, Mario, talk about what Pluto kind of represents for you and the planet Venus.
Well, I'm going to talk about it in two different stratas, or spheres, rather. The first one is as I usually talk about it, is in terms of Pluto represents for us a truth in our life that we must return to over and over again. And thus it represents a type of phoenix rising from the ashes, transformation. So our Pluto's always negotiating our experiences with reality on one level. And then when we reach a certain level of maturity, we just kind of wake up on another level, kind of like the Keats metaphor from one of his poems or prose pieces where he talks about you live in one room for a certain time of your life, and then all of a sudden you wake up one morning and you're in a different room. So that's how I see Pluto being, and one of the most important planets other than the sun in one's chart, obviously. And then Venus, I see as a more personal planet. One's kind of personal values, style, how one represents themselves, how one dresses their form, and Venus, of course, rules Fridays, and so it rules. There's certain esoteric meanings to Venus as well that have to do with like it being a day of execution on Fridays. But I'm not going to go into all that. Okay, your turn, Mom.
So yeah, Pluto, the outermost planet. Well, one of, right? We're always discovering new planets, but it's I want to bring in the mythology first. So the Greeks kind of had this notion of what Pluto was. I mean, they called it Hades, the god of the unseen. So they had Uranus, who would be the god of the skies, Neptune of the sea, and then Hades, which ruled over the vast, mysterious, subterranean regions. And this was believed to be where souls went after death, a kind of storing place for consciousness and memories. And within their mythology, actually, Hades was not, you wouldn't pray to him. He did not receive prayers. They didn't build temples for him like other gods or deities. But then the Romans actually took this idea and expanded on it, and that's where we get Pluto from. Romans were a bit more egoic and maybe death-fearing, you could say. And so they kind of, with the idea of Pluto, they made him a ruler of kind of a guardian of treasures of the below. So that's where we get our ore, minerals, gems, all that stuff under the earth. Pluto was seen to rule over that. And that's where we get the word plutocrat or plutocracy. Plutocrat is someone who has vast wealth. And I find it interesting because when we talk about Pluto coming, or Venus rather, coming close into Pluto in a conjunction, both of these planets share that kind of representation of resources in one way or another. And people who have the Venus-Pluto conjunction tend to be people who can amass a lot of wealth, on one expression of it. Like for instance, JP Morgan had this aspect in his natal chart. Venus also is not only just resources, values, but it's how we attract. And in a man's chart, so in a woman's chart, kind of how she attracts or seduces, and in a man's chart, what he finds attractive in the feminine sense. And so with people who have Venus conjunct Pluto, there tends to be this very magnetic undercurrent of being able to attract, seduce. There's a need or compulsion even to be viewed as attractive and sexually desirable. A lot of famous kind of like sex symbols have this Venus, Pluto, and heart aspect. Today we are just focusing in on the conjunction though. So with that kind of background of the two planets, I think this conjunction can be an evolutionary process as it relates to intimacy, meaning I don't think it's the most comfortable place for Venus to be in a close conjunction to Pluto. And again, we're talking about a tight orb because it's such an outermost planet. So ideally 2 degrees, 3 degrees would be considered this aspect. I wanted to talk about it though, because I've dated people or attracted people who have this aspect, and I've, made some real life observations of how I feel like it plays out. But it can point to a real fear, because Pluto is the fear and it's very unconscious around intimacy and around getting too close, feeling almost vulnerable to be intimate. And so it gets almost funneled or channeled through just attracting for sex and maybe not wanting to attract on a subconscious level real love, but rather viewing affection as something that is like a way to control. And likely what people with this aspect might have experienced their primary caregiver using affection almost as a means of control. And yeah, that's kind of how I've perceived it in people that I've gotten close to. But I'm curious, Mario, if you've have any experience with this aspect or have thoughts.
I'll get to that. I'll start with my thoughts. First off, I want to say, pay close attention to the frame that Molly's developed here. She's using very, very particular keywords like compulsion, needs, seduce, magnetism. And just to nuance what you said in your great hit on Pluto being related because of the Romans, the plutocracy, plutocrats, guardian of treasures, Venus does rule our finances. So when we're looking at Venus in our charts and its transits, even looking at the sign our Venus is in the house relates to how we can expand our finances and how we make money, just as the second house as well. And when you bring those two factors together, as Molly underscored, we are looking at a process of amassing wealth through finance, through power, or almost equating power with wealth is another conflation that comes up with this aspect. The idea that wealth is power, power is wealth, are very close. I also want to underscore what you said, Molly, about a fear of intimacy. What I've noticed in personal experiences, there's such a huge fear of intimacy that the person might, on the surface, pretend and make all kinds of dramatic emphasis and explanations about how they want love, that love doesn't come to them. And then if you really sit down and ask them, hey, do you think that you really want love? They might have to look deeper inside and actually ask that question to themselves, because as Molly noted, what I've found with them is they're not really interested in love. In fact, it's almost like a symptom of abuse that I've found with them, where it's like they use the physical body to avoid intimacy.
Would you say,
go ahead.
okay. I was just going to ask, so maybe that I'm assuming maybe you might be speaking of women who have this aspect. I think men with this aspect might attract women who almost want to just use them for sex or have almost like an agenda, but maybe have it's like they're pursuing them, but not from like a heartfelt place. Whereas
Yeah,
maybe
it's
the
the same
women,
in reverse. Well spoken, and an excellent point. And that goes along with Pluto, with Lilith as well as that asteroid. It's men
mm,
who have like the Sun or Venus opposing or conjuncting Lilith or Scorpio or Pluto, are doing the same thing, right? In a different manner. They're more kind of like pulling in, right? They're doing the, it's more of like the men take on that feminine role of it and the women become it, right? They take on
right,
the masculine role of that. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Because the contrast to that is using the intimacy in a way to hide the body. You know what I mean? Or to like use emotions to hide the body. But in reverse, it's using the body to protect the spirit inside from anything too intimate, too scary. Right.
I've noticed in the charts of men who have the conjunction or sometimes the other hard Venus Pluto aspects, they can almost use resources or money as a way to attract the feminine or attract, partnership or quote unquote love. If that's real love or not is debatable, but so the types of men who are more likely to think they can kind of buy love, so to speak,
Mm.
which, yeah, I don't have to get into how that can express, but I think we all know like ways that could manifest.
Um, I'm going to agree, and I'm also going to emphasize your quotation and nuance on the term love, because there is no love here until there's transformation. I mean, what Pluto is, and me and Molly are talking about this both in the definition initially, was Pluto in itself is, and maybe let me riff a little here because I think I'm working on something in relationship to this. And we needed to ground this in mythology because we're not coming from a static perspective of what Pluto is. We're looking at astrology as something where the planets are shifting, changing, and growing with us, right? Look at the conception of the Greeks. You know, the gods are active in human experiences and human actions. And we're going through right now the end of the first Pluto cycle, where Pluto's about to complete its its journey through all the different signs of the zodiac, all 12 signs. So we're living in a huge time. And that's not only a transformation of the collective soul of humanity, but it's a transition for each of us individually in terms of what Pluto is in us, because it's becoming something else, thus transforming us, and we are becoming something else. And I'm going to underscore like this, and this is going to sound kind of weird, so Molly, definitely give me feedback on this. This is a new idea. What if Pluto in itself, because it's in a sense the antithesis of our solar force of the sun, in a sense it's the antithesis because Pluto does represent the god of the underworld. And if Pluto's the god of the underworld, then we know that the sun is the god of the outer world because it expands itself through light, through being able to see. But the light can also blind us to things, which is why the underworld has to exist, or rather the moon has to exist, because the moon's light helps us see things that are there, but not with the physical eye, with the third eye, you know what I mean, or the intuitive eye. But this underworld concept of Pluto is in a sense an antithesis to the sun. And my idea is this: because it's some kind of black sun in a way, it's feeding a different, it's not feeding the life force. It's almost like if you think of an eclipse, where when an eclipse occurs, the whole world gets cold around that eclipse, like all of a sudden light and heat in order for us to live, all the neutrinos that the sun is feeding us with is gone. And then so it's a sort of dead world, like nothing grows in the world of the dead, you know, as is the Persephone myth, right? Where she spends half her time in Hades, if we go to the Greek myths.
Mm-hmm.
So my idea is this: somehow Plutonians and I'm generalizing here as we've been doing these aspects with Pluto, especially these close aspects, as you were mentioning in close orb. What we're essentially looking at is these are people who have Scorpio or Pluto in a place in their chart that's dead. And they're here to change the nature of that soil so they can grow something there that's living. They can
I like that.
nurture something there that actually lives.
I like that. Yeah. So I would
But
add
big.
that because of that, there's an extreme level of depth that is possible with these aspects as well. So of course there's the shadow, right? But ultimately with Pluto, the disintegration happens, so reintegration on a higher level may take place.
Yes.
And so
Yes,
you get
exactly.
people with this aspect who are very deep when it comes to, you know, when they've gone through that evolutionary process and
Yes.
are very committed, I would say very loyal partners, and in the higher aspect of viewing it in terms of our monetary resources, can amass great wealth and power and influence. You know who else has this aspect? It just came to my mind. Beyonce. Did I say that? Yeah. Who else? A lot of like very prominent pop culture kind of icons. Madonna has one of the hard aspects of Venus and Pluto as well. But yeah, with Pluto at work, it's like we're forced to do his bidding in a way. Like when I say Pluto at work, I mean Pluto in close aspect to a personal planet. We'll be unaware of his control until, and perhaps we'll experience like I was talking about earlier, discomfort or dis-ease in expressing, you know, the planetary energy that he's conjunct, until we have been able to kind of see the Pluto within ourselves and see it for what it is, because it is it can operate for, you know, maybe the earlier parts of the life in the unseen.
Yes, yes. And so that's why we get in, and I'm not trying to get into it now. I really don't want to. But that's why, you know, trauma and abuse themes are always moving around Scorpio and Pluto and these type of places in the horoscope. And because they're a dark corner, they're like this dead, stale part of the underworld of ourselves, and it represents any activity that might have occurred in the unseen as children, as, you know, as just traumas that we've, you know, gone through in order to awaken those dead areas. Because essentially what I'm saying is that because this represents dead things until transformation, it is in itself almost a anti-life expression, meaning to say it has an appetite and it needs to feed. So it's almost like a demonic metaphor I'm looking for, like a seed of some kind of demonic impulse, where it's a part of ourselves that's like a void
Like
that
a parasite.
a parasite or a void that we can never, that we feel with it, that we can never quite fully feed. And until we're able to zero in on what's happening and look at that part of ourselves, it is only then that we can replace the soil and add nutrients so it can grow something there anew, or for the first time, grow something there. I mean, not that we weren't there before. I mean, the spirit comes into the body and it experiences trauma, but whatever the seed really was always still in the soil. And maybe that soil was never nurturing because it was adhesive. So maybe the seed could never get out of that to flower. Yeah, so, and then touching on some other things you said. So you mentioned Beyonce and Madonna. Now these are singers. These are singers. These are people in the public light, right? These are humans who are on the public stage, right? And knowing both of them, we know that first off, both of them are a part of some kind of weird dark cult. You know, we don't need to go into Hollywood or the music industry to be aware of that, right? We know that they have certain allegiances You could see it in the symbolism. Madonna has her famous picture of her jean jacket, right? Where she's like looking back and you see the back, what's painted on the back of her jean jacket. And then Beyonce talks about multiple having, having a doppelganger or multiple personality, right? Expressiveness, right? And we know she's part of a certain cult. Now, they both are representing a dual aspect, but they're also representing an allegiance to the underworld, I would say. So have they made their transformation? Are they going to make any more transformations? Who's to say? But I would point out that they're still living in the underworld, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that. Just being these kind of sex pop icons who are viewed as like very powerful, and yeah, I could see that for sure.
And then equate it with what I said earlier. Are they even alive in that representation?
Mhm,
Like they're seen as
mhm,
powerful, but who are they on their own? What is, I mean, maybe we need to talk about for a moment what power is, because too often people talk about power as if it's something attainable or not attainable for this or that. What people don't understand, I think, and this is knowledge from the Tarot, is that the realm of power in itself is the realm of the fool. It's not something anyone can hold on to. Power is something ephemeral. It's like sand, it slips through our fingers.
mm,
Now, the Scorpio and the Plutonic placements in that part of our chart is in itself a fist that is holding, right? It's a fixed sign. It represents fixed energy. So it's holding, but that sand is still slipping through that clenched fist. Again, power is not something that can be held onto in this realm. Perhaps the spirit through its experience here can, in its phoenix rising from the ashes of materiality, perhaps it can retain and bring with itself its power,
mm,
what it has earned here. I think another thing is like the idea about earning something in contrast to taking it. Power likes to take, it doesn't like to earn.
mm. That's a good point.
So yeah, so those are some ideas there. Uh,
Um,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, so this aspect, so people born in 87, there's a around like the fall of 87, this conjunction was happening. We actually just had another Venus Pluto conjunction in around December of last year, 2021. So people born around then will have this natally as well. And yeah, I'm just curious, maybe your experience, if you've been in relationship with a Venus Pluto,
Yeah,
or have any close in your life, like family.
yeah. I mentioned earlier. I mean, definitely with Venus and Scorpio. That's
Yeah,
prevalent, which
which
is similar
operates similar.
energy. Yeah, it operates maybe not as powerful, uh, but in terms of Pluto conjunct Venus, yes, and it really depends on the person where they're at, because it's almost like, and it depends on you. I mean, like I have Pluto in the sixth house, so when I see Plutonic energy, like it can't hide from me. It's so evident to me. The sixth house is like an X-ray into other people's 12th house. It reads the Plutonic energy. So even if it's trying to be hidden, I see it. Does that make sense? And yeah, yeah. So that's all I'm going to say on that. And I've already expressed how it shows.
Sure. And in your experience, or how do you believe or think there are ways that one can uh, integrate or empower this energy within themselves, if for those who have it natally?
Great question. I don't believe. I either know things or I don't. And then my thoughts in relation to this that are still unformed would be around the idea of really looking at that soil and those areas of one's life and asking oneself, am I being integrous? Am I coming from a place of support for myself and others? Because having power, having control is also, having leadership, is also having great responsibility. I mean, what is true power? True power is responsibility, but that's in itself, it's something it's a great challenge. The more power one has, the more knowledge. Maybe I'm conflating things here, but I would just say to look at, if you have plutonic aspects, look at what is supporting that, what other planets are supporting that world or that emphasis, and if that's leading you to your North Node destiny or not. For some people, it might lead them there. For some people, it might not. I see it as the underworld in your chart. So seeing what places are you essentially living in an underworld, and how can you, like Persephone, how can you make a deal, right? To live in both worlds? No, depending on your chart, as me and Molly were talking before we started recording, it's like Pluto, that planet, that energy, that truth is going to support what it supports in your destiny in this lifetime. And there's no judgment on it. It's just what it is. What do you think, Molly? Do you have any ideas on what you think can be of help and guidance and supportive for people with these often highly traumatic aspects?
Right. Yes. I think a big step is like cultivating self-trust,
That's great.
letting people in incrementally. Maybe you don't have to like fully let people in, but practicing levels of intimacy, because it can be easy to unconsciously kind of enter into contracts with this aspect. I think because of, as you pointed out, it can be a marker for having been kind of manipulated or conflating control with affection. So yeah, there's kind of an untethering that one can do. Of course, sex inherently does involve power. It's hard to like completely untether those two things, but I think if there's like an awareness and an awareness in when you're connecting with another in relationship, or connecting with your resources, even, of is there any unconscious pull? Are you trying to use this as a form of manipulation to meet the ends of Pluto, or is there an authentic connection there? And exploring letting yourself be seen or exposed even, and that can happen, I think, or one can practice that incrementally.
Great. No, that's all really. You were gonna say something else? I think I interrupted.
No, thumbs up.
Okay, I'm gonna add one last thing, and that was all really good. I mean, I want to stand on some of that, on the shoulders of what you just said, and say this. This is a little extreme to say, but I think it's something that really needs to be looked at, especially for people that have like these deep plutonic placements, is know that there are hidden parts of your life, and know that you'll deal with them when you're ready. But know that in those shadows of who you are as a seed, and that seed, despite the hellacious soil and climate that surrounded it in your upbringing, you can still nurture that seed because you may not even know who you truly are. Pluto represents the underworld. It's a world that doesn't nurture any type of growth. Like Molly said in the beginning, the Greeks had the idea of Hades, and no one worshipped or offered anything to it, which is very interesting because it almost says that why would you offer anything to something that's not living? So it's almost like I'm taking the leap and saying that in essence, these parts of us are dead, have never existed. And thus perhaps us who have been hidden in these parts of our charts, who grew up in these hidden parts, have never existed. Perhaps the trauma has been so bad that our spirit has been stifled all along, and nurturing and going back and doing the hard work and feeling all the horror of what you went through, not necessarily excavating it. I'm not saying that needs to be done, but emotions get trapped in the body. And perhaps for many Plutonic people, you don't even know who you are until you do the work to bring that out, because perhaps it was never even allowed to be under real light, under sunlight, under nurturing life force energy.
Well said. Yeah. On that note, we both do, Mario and I both do consulting astrology, meaning we'll do birth chart kind of interpretations, because as you mentioned, Mario, it really does depend on like aspects to this particular configuration if you have it in your chart, and then also where you are in your journey, and the own personal work you've done around it. But yeah, we're always open to discuss these aspects in the context of the larger whole of your birth chart, if you want to reach out to either one of us for that.
Yeah, thanks so much. Please give any feedback if you'd like.
Thank you.
Okay.